Hello, welcome to Karma, Destiny and Choice. Today we will be looking at the subject of karma and siblings. So if you have brothers and sisters or even cousins, please sit back and enjoy the next half an hour with us. Welcome back, Sister Denise. Hello.
Hello, Magla.
Do siblings have karma with each other? And when I speak of siblings, I'm referring to full biological brothers and sisters, as well as stepchildren, as well as adopted children.
I think that the karma, the depth of karmic account or bondage, or the karmic harmony will be played out in how the relationship evolves. There are some siblings who are born together, grow up together, go to school together. The family unit is very oriented towards interaction with each other, and it may play out well or it may play out badly, but there's a lot of interaction. Then there are others where there's very little karma between the siblings, and how it plays out is that you go to one school, the other one goes to another school, the other one goes to another school. You don't have much interaction with each other. Sometimes the parents will send different children to different schools, and they will not be much present, and so in that case, like in my case, I stayed at home. My two brothers were at boarding school, and then in holidays I was sent to one place, they were sent to another place, or they were kept home. So I had very little contact with my brothers, very little contact. So I very much grew up as a person who grows up alone. So even though they were there, not much karma. Very little karma with the parents. So I used to think, oh, you know, am I really in this family, or I don't really belong to this family. I somehow got here, but I'm not much involved in it, you know. And so that had a very good influence in keeping me very independent, which I like. And you get other people who are twins. Can have fraternal twins, or you can have identical twins. And what I've observed with identical twins is that they're always with each other through their whole lives. And they look the same, dress the same, feel the same, have the same friends. They're really very, very much like one soul with two bodies in many ways. So it's quite difficult to sort of pinpoint. The fact of being a sibling indicates certain particular kind of karma, but there are certain duties that you have to a sibling. And the duty, according to the philosophy of karma, between siblings is the lightest, in the sense that there's the least amount of obligation. So the ideal relationship between siblings is one where there is love and regard. You don't owe a sibling more or less than that. In other relationships, blood relationships, there are certain obligations, much more than between siblings. And so in spirituality, it is said that from the angle of you being a child of God, and every other human being also being a child of God, your relationship with all other human beings should be looked at in that way. These are my brothers. Or with the body, these are my brothers and sisters. Why brothers between souls is because of rights.
What do you mean by that?
Rights to the inheritance, the property of God. What does God own? We were in a conversation earlier today in which it was said, God is the owner of the moon. And I remember in the 1960s when the first man on the moon came, and what they do, they plant a flag that this country owns the moon. But from this other angle, God is the owner of the moon. A human being cannot own a celestial body. People want to be the owners of the earth, they try. But interestingly, in the law of karma, there is no single one of the brothers who can be owner of all the others. Only God can occupy that position.
There are those who have less than ideal relationships with their siblings and have to grow up in the same household with such individuals. Then you get parents who play one sibling against the other, and where there wasn't conflict before, creates competition, and with that, feelings of spite and jealousy and all of that. We'll come to parenting and karma in another episode. What does an individual stand to do if their relationships with their brother or sister, or sisters or brothers, is ugly?
It's a very, very unfortunate situation. So one thing we would say is, if you land up or take birth in a household like that, we'd have to say you must have done some karma to create that. Or, as I often mention, if you haven't done any karma to create that, then there's some very powerful lessons that you have to learn by being in such a difficult situation. And if you have to learn such powerful lessons, it means that your destiny is very, very high, and you have to pass through this dark place in order to get the skills to handle a very high destiny. But mostly you would say that it's negative karma that put you in that situation. So you suffer, and then you participate in causing other people to suffer, and you get tied up in this terrible karmic bondage. But if you want to get free, I think first what you have to do is see in what ways you are complicit.
How do you mean?
Well, when there's a bad situation going on all around you and bad things are happening to you, you learn how to be bad.
That is true. So you absorb the negativity.
You do, and you replay it. You give out what you got, and you have to take a look at that, because you cannot come out of that situation unless you stop that. And that requires a lot of inner strength and inner power of character to just not be like these other people. But generally speaking, in dysfunctional families, you get children who say, I promise I will never be like my mother, my father, my siblings, or whatever. But then they grow up, they do exactly the same thing because they absorbed it. It's very difficult to be in it without absorbing it. And if you want to be free from absorbing it, what usually happens is you do absorb it and you become that way. And then you have to undo all that conditioning, might even call it brainwashing, because it's effectively that. You have to become a healthy, socially appropriate person, and that requires psychological work, it requires personal attention, work with healthy people, having a strong relationship with God. All of these things are going to enable you to come out of it, but it's a big piece of work. But if you do that kind of work, you end up as a very well integrated person. So people who have had to do that kind of work very often are head and shoulders above people who never had to handle any problem like that. So it has its upside.
There are scenarios in families where one child is academically gifted and the others are not.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one who's not academically gifted will think, I'm stupid, I'm nothing, I'm not important, my parents love the other one and not me. How does one deal with that? Because that also comes through from childhood.
I've observed that in some situations in my own extended family, and what I saw in all cases, and that may be because of our culture, that the more academically gifted you are, the more pressure they put on you. And they put so much pressure on you that you are so stressed and so traumatized by the obligation to be first at all times, that the one who's less academically gifted is not subjected to that and is actually able to grow more normally and ends up much more successful. In some families, they pin their hopes for financial upgrading on that academically gifted child, so they pamper that child. But others for whom being academically gifted is the honor of the family, then they pressure that child, you see. So one gets favored, the other gets oppressed. Yeah, it's a strange way that people use and abuse their children.
Okay, so how does a child who feels that level of insecurity because of comparison throughout his or her life against a more intelligent sibling heal from that?
I've experienced the opposite. The more intelligent one is the one who is damaged, and the less intelligent one is all right. Because the less intelligent one is allowed to grow naturally. The more intelligent one is subjected to all kinds of pressure and oppression and put down and this and that. They're the ones who feel insecure, even though they hold the brilliance, but they're penalized for their brilliance.
From a karmic point of view, is there any familial obligation from one brother to another, or sisters, or is it just left up to the individual? You get siblings who enjoy a wonderfully close bond throughout their entire lives, and then you get those who barely exchange a word at Christmas or Diwali.
This is because of their karma with each other, but there are cultures where the rules have set out the order, you know, the first son, the second son, the third son, the first son's wife, the second son's wife, etc. There's a pecking order. And it is thought in those cultures that if you establish the pecking order, you can cause it to be functional, but sometimes it causes it to be very rigid and very oppressive. So I think a lot of these social rules thought that if we do it like this, it will make it work out well. And then cultures which don't have those things and they just let people operate more or less how they want, in both cases don't take into consideration karma and the dysfunctionality of the family as a whole will also be like a radar that attracts other dysfunctional individuals, which is anyway karma with each other. So you get these really seriously dysfunctional families, and then if you go and marry into another family and produce children, you're going to add to the dysfunctionality. And this is why I think that there is so much development in psychotherapeutic methods to help people through all of these family difficulties. If we can really understand about karma, to bring in that angle to bear on the situation, I think it will give clarity And then also, if you bring in a spiritual practice, it will give the power needed to get through a bad situation and potentially even turn it around from relationships of bondage to relationships of harmony. Because there are practices and rules and ways that the philosophy of karma describes, that if you do like this, like this, like this, then you will make a bad situation good, but it has to be learned. And I think one of the reasons why we're doing this show is to try to put it out there what all of these elements are.
If one's karma with one's sibling is not good, then a spiritually aware person would want to ensure that they don't perpetuate the negative karma. They would want to lessen it. You spoke of virtues extensively throughout this series. So what virtues does one emerge or use in order to ensure that my relationship with my siblings are good throughout my life?
You can make sure that from your side, the karma you do in interaction with them is accurate.
And what do you mean by accurate?
There are many details about karma philosophy. For example, if you treat a person with respect, that would be accurate. If they treat you with disrespect, you don't have to participate in that. You be respectful, but you also don't come under their influence. You be respectful and let go. You don't try and get too close. You're cordial, you're correct. You don't let yourself get pulled into something where you could be manipulated or trapped or something like this. You have to be very, very skillful and know that they will try many ways to get you to get upset. And you have to understand that and not get upset or not take personally any of the strange things that they do. So for that, along with virtues, you need powers, because you have to endure strange behavior, manipulative, harmful behavior, but you do not get taken by that. And then from your side, the karma is accurate, and this is going to change the situation. If there's a debt between you and that person, they may carry on accumulating more debt, but you are reducing debt from your side. And it may be that what's needed in the relationship is you finish the debt and part your ways. Because what soul consciousness or spiritual practice tells you is, you're an actor, these are actors, here's a situation. You would not say, this is my mother, my father, my brother, and make them yours, you see. You would say, these are actors playing the mother, the father, the sister, the brother, like that. And there's a situation. And so you have to detect clearly, what is the situation, what is the lesson, what is my weakness that is being challenged here, so that you use the situation to bring yourself up to the level of skill in relationship that is needed. And you do not try and fix the situation, fix the people. You do not take responsibility for their happiness. There may be people who say, you are responsible for my happiness. And you say, yeah, you're welcome to your opinion, but I'm not. You're responsible for your own happiness.
That is unfortunately something that very few people understand. There are more people in the world who expect others to make them happy than those who don't. Far more.
Yes, yes, because you see a person as a commodity to be used.
There's that old joke, you cannot choose your family, you can choose your friends. Is that true?
Whichever group of people you get born into is because of your karma. And when you're born into a family, there's a blood tie, and you can't undo that blood tie until death. They are your family whether you like it or not, and you're tied by that blood. And you know, you can leave, go to the other end of the universe, but they're still your family, you know. With your friends, I think there's much more flexibility. You're not in that bondage. So I think with your friends, it can be a matter of karma, but I think that, you know, this magnetism of falling in love with someone is a sign of karmic bondage. Then there's also, with friends, affinity, you know. You have an affinity with someone, and that's not such a strong karmic bondage sign. That's more a sign of harmony than bondage. So I think that the adage is based on some quite sound observation.
We are about to say goodbye to our audience. What would you like to leave them with before we do so?
I would like people to consider that the families that they have, or the group of people with whom they are, these are actors. And you get to play with these actors for the duration of the scene. And you want to have good interaction and try to have equal karma, a mutually beneficial interaction, because then when the karma is stable and steady, you come into the interaction, you pass through that scene, and then it's finished and you move on to the next scene. But you're not diminished by it, but rather enriched. And you don't get attached or enmeshed or involved with the people, but it's just a very nice interaction in which everyone gets benefit, but no one's tied up.
Just before we say goodbye, you mentioned the word detachment many times. Is it applicable in this scenario as well?
Very much so. You see,
okay, tell us why.
Because detachment means that you're not in a trap, you're not in prison, you're not under obligation, you're nobody's slave, nobody's your slave. The relationship is in harmony, you see, so that you come together, you can come apart. There's not a situation where you can't live with each other and you can't live without each other. That's real bondage.
Well, I was supposed to say goodbye to you right now, but this conversation's got more interesting as we're going along. It happens, does it not, that the name of the relationship is not the form of the relationship?
This is true.
I'm thinking of scenarios where somebody might have the title and be biologically your eldest sister or your elder brother, but in reality, the way the relationship plays out is that soul is more like a parent and remains so throughout your life.
This happens when the family is very large, because if the mother has 8, 9, 10 children, she is weakened by having to bear so many children, and she is not able to manage the older ones when she's having the young ones. And so very often the older brother, older sister has to do the parenting, and that remains the relationship for the rest of the life, because that child could never really get close to the real mother and father because they're dealing with all these so many other children. Or it can happen if the mother is very sick and is unable to take care, so then one sibling will take care of the other or the others and act as the parent, and they become effectively the parent.
That's interesting karma as well, isn't it?
Sometimes even the grandmother becomes the mother. That happens.
Yeah. Now we have to say goodbye because we've run out of time. And thank you. This has been an extremely interesting discussion. I hope that those of you listening at home have gathered some tools that Sister Denise shared as to how to keep your relationship with your siblings good throughout your life. And it is approaching them from a spiritual perspective, and not that this is my brother or my sister. Quite a lot of wisdom to that, I think. Thank you, Sister Denise. Thank you. And thank you at home for joining us. Take care. Goodbye.